Welcome to the Arabesque Scissors YouTube channel, where I invite you to follow along as I organise my sewing space to give you inspiration to organise yours. I love great storage solutions, and as a sewist and quilter, there's nothing more exciting than being able to sew my own storage. My current organisational focus is cataloguing and storing and effectively using my fabric stash. And today I'm going to be showing you how to make my modular fabric boxes. So just an overview of all the tools that you're going to need. You're going to need a coordinating pair of fat quarters for each size of the boxes, and you need to make sure that your lining fat quarter is a minimum of 21.5 inches wide. And if it's just slightly smaller than that, you're going to have to just cut the corners down on your lining just slightly. You're going to need a piece of vinyl cut to size. You're going to need Peltex cut to size. Now the pattern requires this to be 20 inches wide, and the Peltex says that it's 20 inches wide, but when I measured mine was 1/4 inch wider, so just double check the measurement on your Peltex. You will also need a towel for pressing, basic sewing tools, so rotary cutter, scissors, a fabric marker, a hero marker. I've also got a piece of leather here, or you can use vinyl for the pull on the box. I have an extra piece cut just as an extra spacer, and you need a 10mm rivet. Now to sew the vinyl, I have got a Teflon foot, but if you don't have one of these, I'm going to show you a little hack with washi tape where you can put this underneath your foot and you will be able to sew vinyl without any problems. You can either use longer binding clips to hold the vinyl in place as you're stitching it, or you can actually just hold it in place temporarily with washi tape as well. To set the rivet, I don't have a Rivet Press yet, so I just have a basic hole punch and anvil and hammer set up here, which works fine if you've only got a few rivets that you want to do occasionally. And also helpful to hold the lining in place if you feel that it needs it. It doesn't really need this, but this is steamer seam, 1/4 inch wide, which is just like a hemming tape that fuses in place for you. So here I've got my lining fabric and my body fabric, and to start with you're going to want to give these a really good press, because once you've made it into the basket, you're going to find that it's quite hard to get any creases out of it. So start off by giving it a really good press and then cut these to size. So I'm going to, for my lining, I'm actually going to keep my selvage on here. I'm going to use this cute print and these colours here as a feature that folds over the edge of the basket. And this is also extremely useful if your fat quarter is not quite 21.25 inches wide. Okay, so we're going to mark the corner sections on the box now. Okay, now you're going to need to mark the large dot that you'll be using as your sewing guide. Okay, there's our lining cut out. You can just set this aside and we'll go and cut out the interfacing. Now I find the interfacings easier to mark on the non-adhesive side, So make sure you've got it that side up and measure your corner. Now you can go ahead and cut these corner sections out, bearing in mind that we're going to keep these to make the square modular box. Okay, so set these 4 pieces aside, and we will need one extra one to make the small square one. This is a really useful way of using up all of your scraps. Okay, so we've got the main body of our box here. We've got that facing the wrong side up, and we've got our Peltex here, and we've got this facing adhesive side down. So you want to center the Peltex over the main fabric, making sure that it's all even throughout. And then I've got a pressing cloth here. This is just a piece of linen that's quite thick, and it can take a lot of heat, and then you just need to give your Peltex a really good fuse. So just have another check so you can see that some of this is not sticking properly, so just go back and make sure it's really well stuck down. Then you can flip this over and give this another fuse on the right side of the fabric. Okay, so now you just need to take your hero marker here and give this a really good score. And you want to really put some weight into this, make a really good deep crease into the interfacing here. Okay, so you need to choose which of your short sides here is going to be the front of your box, because this is where we're going to put the fabric label. So I'm going to choose this one here. So you need to center this clear vinyl here, and it needs to be 1/2 inch up from the crease that you've just scored and 1 inch in from each side. And then we're going to get these long clips here and pin these in place like so. So the other thing you can actually do is take some painter's tape and tape that top and bottom as well, whichever you feel more comfortable with. And then we'll take this to the sewing machine and we will stitch on all 3 sides to make a pocket. Okay, so we're going to be sewing the vinyl pocket on now, and I'm using a nice contrast red thread here that matches really well with the lining that I'm going to put in. I've got my washi tape on the bottom of my foot here. My stitch length is about 2.4. So I'm going to back stitch as well. Now as you come up to the clip, you're going to just remove the clip. I'm stitching about 1/8 to 1/16, somewhere in that range, away from the edge of the foot. Okay, so now we're ready to sew the corners together of the modular fabric box. So we're going to fold these directly opposing corners right sides together. Make sure they meet up exactly, and then just take your binding clip. These are much easier to use than pins, so I recommend you get some larger ones of these. And we're going to stitch with a 1/2 inch seam all the way down to this large dot. So I'll switch back to a white thread here. Okay, so I have a very nice seam. It's nice and close to the interfacing. This side is pretty good as well. So now we're ready to turn the box around the right way, and before you do that you just need to double check again that your interfacing is still nice and strongly fused, and if any of these corners are just coming away a little bit, just give it another press from the right side, and remember not to press your vinyl. Got this old hand towel that I use for pressing this as we go. So there's really no nice way to turn this around the right way. You just have to crush it up and push it through. It's going to crease terribly, and some of the interfacing might come unstuck a little bit. You can press it all very nicely back into shape once you've done that. So just take your towel here, and this is just going to support it inside. I've got this folded so it roughly fits the size of the base, and with my hand in there safely out of the way, just very carefully making sure you don't burn yourself. Give this a good press. And you can also give your edges here just a bit of a pinch. This also just helps bring the box in so that it's not bulging out quite so much. Moving on to sewing the lining. So now we've stitched our lining down, so we're just going to give it a good press. Okay, so now we're going to press under a 1/4 inch hem. If you would like to use some of this steamer seam tape, you would be applying this to the edge of your, about to 1/2 inch away from each of the corners. Now we're ready to just put these, so we've got wrong sides together here. We've got the lining still facing inside here. We're just going to place it inside the box. We're going to push these corners firmly down into the box and just manipulate it until you can fold over about 1/2 inch, and just line this up nicely as you go around, and you'll find that this lining actually helps hold the box all in a bit straighter. So the very last part of this project is placing your leather pull on the front of your basket, and the best way to do this is using a rivet press, but if you're like me and you don't actually have a rivet press yet, I'm going to show you how to do it just with one of these little anvils and punches. A rivet press is better, but if you're not going to go out and buy one just to make a few of these, then don't bother. This will work just as well. So I've got my rivet, I've got my tools here, I've got my marking pen, I have an old cutting mat here that you can see is multi-punched because I've used this a fair bit over the years. Find the centre of your box. I'm going to measure 2.5 inches to the middle and 1.25 inches down. I'm going to place a mark on that spot. And then I like to use my awl to punch a hole just carefully through both layers here, so I'm going to push it completely through. I'm going to support it on the inside there so that I'm not going to rip a really big hole in my lining fabric. And I'm going to come back again from the other side and make sure this is a decent sized hole here, and then just double check that this is going to go through. So yes, my rivet fits very nicely here. You just need to fold it in half. Going to center that over the hole there. Going to place your rivet through both of them. You're going to put your spacer on the other side, and then you're going to snap the back of the rivet on and just push it together until you hear it click. You need to find the part of your anvil that's going to fit and snap that in there. Just lie that down, make sure you're on top of your cutting mat. So this is my pressing tool that's going to press these together. I can't really get a good shot of this at the moment, but I'm just going to hit this and that's actually riveted nicely together. You can feel that it's quite stiff. So there we are. Now I recommend that you print your printable labels on some heavier weight cardstock. I've got these printed on about a 200 GSM, and I recommend that you cut them out with a pen knife or a craft knife and a steel ruler, and find an old cutting mat that you don't particularly mind ruining, because if you use one of these on your quilting cutting mat, you will actually cut quite deep grooves in it, which you really don't want. So save your good cutting mat for quilting and use an old one for cutting these up. So you can place a catalogue card label inside of that, and you're all ready to fill it up with your fat quarters. So moving on to the square modular box, I've got my outer fabric cut out here, I've got my lining cut out here. Just going to set this aside. Okay, so here's where you're going to use your offcut interfacing pieces. So you're going to take the 4 corners from the long box that you cut out, and you're going to need to cut one more for the base. Now I recommend that you double check that these are exactly the right measurement, because if you've just been just a smidge out where you cut the first one out, these could be just a little bit too big. So it's okay if they're just slightly smaller. So to start fusing, I like to start on one of the outer edges. So center that so that you have a 1/2 inch overhanging on either end. Take your pressing cloth, and give this a really good press. Okay, so then we're going to move around. So you want these 2 corners to exactly be meeting as close as possible. Okay, so lastly we're going to fuse the base, and so you would need that to fit exactly inside. You don't want it overlapping at all. So place that fusible side down, and another good press on this side. Just check that, give this a bit of a tug anywhere that you see it might be coming off. Just give it a bit of an extra press. Okay, so if you're using these offcuts, you aren't going to need to score any of these joins because you've already got them handily there. So we can move right along to sewing the vinyl pocket on. Just use painter's tape or washi tape, and what I like to do is just fold under a little bit of an edge there, and this just gives you something to pull on, so you can pull it away as you're sewing towards it. And the first piece of tape I'll put on is there. I'm going to put another little piece on at the top, This one can stay there the whole time because you won't be stitching along the top. So I'm going to put another piece just down the bottom corner here, so that as I'm stitching down this side I can pull this away as I'm coming to it. And I'll do one more little piece just on this side here. So now we can take this to the sewing machine and sew it down. So moving on to sewing the line. I'm just going to take that to the machine and sew each of these seams, joining these together, right sides together, sewing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we're up to turning the small square box around the right way. So you're going to have to just squish your box. Come on, you can do it. So you push those corners out. If possible, you want to try and get the side seam of the fabric poking through both of the sides of the interfacing that we've got here. Okay, so that wasn't so bad, was it? So now what we need to do is just take our towel and place that inside and just repress all of that to get the creases out. Just being careful when you come to the vinyl pocket, make sure that you don't touch the iron on that. Okay, so there's the outside of our box done. Now just moving on to the lining. Just going to press my side seams. Is press some of the bottom edges into your box here. You're just going to fold your lining by just pulling the two corners like so and folding that so that the edges of the stitching are right on the edge there. That gives an even crisper box shape here. So now we're just going to press under our 1/4 inch all the way around the top of Okay, so I'm not going to use any steamer seam on this one. So we're ready to put this inside the box. So we're going to do the wrong sides together. Just place this down inside, pushing those corners in, and then you're just going to fold this over by about 1/2 inch. Keep pushing it in with your fingers. We can press this from the inside now. Just making sure you don't overly press where the vinyl is. Now, if you would like to use these in the Billy bookcase, double stacked like this, then I actually recommend you leave the leather pull off the front, because that just adds an extra thickness to the box, which means that they don't fit very well into the cupboard like that. And I'm going to place one of the catalogue cards that comes with the pattern inside. And then that's all ready to fill up with my fabric pull for my next project.